This meeting is being recorded.
All right. Good afternoon to everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to speak with you on such a pressing and important issue of veteran suicide. Tell you a little bit about myself. I have been working with Columbia University for about 3 years. I'm a senior scientific consultant, and I'm also a PhD level clinical social worker. Received my degree from UNC North Carolina, probably, 14 years ago. Been a licensed clinical social worker for about 25 years. And I've focused all my work on suicide, either clinically or program development and evaluation or research. I currently am a professor at the Uniformed Service University. And prior to that, I was the director of research and program evaluation for the Department of Defense Suicide Prevention Office. And then before that, I was also the acting director for the American Association for Suicidology. So hopefully I can give you lots of different perspectives on suicide and answer any of your questions that you might have, and hopefully give you some information, some data, and dispel some myths, and also teach you a little bit about a tool that you can use to screen for suicide risk. An interesting note when I was noticing that there's a lot of clinicians on this call is that I was always surprised to see a research article maybe about 10 or 12 years ago that said about more than half of clinicians, including clinical social workers, are not comfortable or don't feel like they know how to ask or assess for suicide risk. That's obviously kind of shocking. It was for me at the time to realize that this is not necessarily a standard practice or standard kind of thing that many clinicians are taught to do. So glad that we can talk about that today. Next slide. Okay, so I think I went over the learning objectives. Well, the first about 20 or 30 minutes is a lot of just information, understanding suicide, understanding veteran suicide. And then we talk about the actual scale, how it was developed, the different items on the scale, and then how to ask it, how to best deliver the scale. And then if we have time, hopefully we'll be able to answer any questions that you might have. Next slide. So suicide is an enormous challenge. In 2021, in the United States, the number of suicides increased to about over 43,000. And then it went down a little bit in 2022, but unfortunately last year, we hit a record high for our suicide rates in the United States. And so that is concerning. So what that tells us, especially being in this field for a while, is that we need to do some different things. Kind of the usual way of approaching suicide. Traditionally, suicide is seen as kind of maybe a symptom of a mental illness, and that we need people to get into treatment. We need to treat them. And that's how we approach suicide. We need to go way beyond that and take on more of a comprehensive public health approach. Other countries have done this, and we've seen some success in different areas. So need to take on more of a holistic, approach that's very much in line with social work values and the social ecological model, understanding all the different aspects of a human's experience and how that might increase risk for suicide or may protect against suicide. This type of approach is very much needed for suicide prevention. So you can see that there's many more suicide attempts than deaths, of course. And we also need to understand that many more men die by suicide than women, more women attempt, but more men die by suicide. And we'll get into why that is in a little bit. And in the United States, unfortunately, we have one of the highest rates of suicides. And in the last 5 or 6 years, most countries, especially most developing countries, have been able to reduce their rate of suicide. The US, unfortunately, not. Our rate continues to increase. In 2021, the most current data on veteran suicides, 6,392 veterans died by suicide. Happens to be the second leading cause of death for veterans under age 45. And we're seeing a large increase in female veteran suicides. There's more female veterans coming into our population here recently, but we're seeing that more women are dying by suicide, more so than their civilian counterparts. Next slide. So understanding risk. Hopefully we all understand that suicide is not an A plus B equals C sort of equation. It's very complex. There's a whole constellation of diverse risk factors at different times and in different aspects of a person's life. There are historical kind of set risk factors, a person's family upbringing, abuse, being exposed to trauma. Certainly we'll see that in the veteran population. One thing that that I always remember is that many veterans, especially, we've been working with a lot of older veterans for this project that belong to the American Legion and the VFW. Many of them will come up to me and say, really appreciate talking about this. It's always been difficult. And they'll share their history of being, experiencing trauma and abuse. And one might think that it usually is attached to their service, but almost always it's actually from their childhood. And so we have to remember that many veterans are bringing in abuse histories, trauma experiences before they enter service. So I think that's important. I think many times people think trauma for veterans start when they start serving, and then the assumption is they experience trauma when they're in service, but that's not necessarily what we see. So you can see some other risk factors: substance abuse, alcohol use. Like gambling and alcohol use is much higher in veteran populations than it is in the civilian population. Disruption in social network. Again, looking at the person in the social environment. When a active duty service member transitions out of the military, there is a loss of identity, kind of that self identity of who I am and what do I do. Very much for many people was defined by their service, by their unit, by their platoon, by their battalion, brigade. Now it changes. Now they go into the kind of a civilian life, and that can be difficult to adjust to. Developing new relationships, new connections with organizations, getting a new job. So that's very important to understand all these different factors. Back in the day, I don't know if they still teach this, but I know in my social work classes, we're taught genograms and echo maps, and these are very important parts of a person's life to understand suicide risk and protective factors as well. Thinking about stressors, financial issues, work issues, legal issues, a loss of a friend or somebody that they knew well. Impulsivity is a big issue that we're learning more and more about in suicide. I know some in the past, there was this idea that this was a chronic process that built and built and built over years. It can for some, but we're learning quite a bit about is that sometimes something catastrophic can happen, something unexpected can happen in a person's life, and then that immediate kind of hopelessness, and then those thoughts of suicide come in, and then from thinking about suicide and attempting can be a very, very quick process. And then so you have all these risk factors, and then in the military and in the veteran community, you have something that we know globally that is really probably one of the most important factors when we think about suicide, and how somebody goes from thinking about suicide and dying is the method of suicide, the lethality of it, the access to it, the familiarity with it is very important. So you'll hear me talk quite a bit about understanding risk factors, obviously individual mental health issues, but also understanding environmental risk, and that is access to firearms, which veterans, when they die by suicide, 70% of the veterans who died by suicide use a personally owned handgun. About the same in the active component as well. So this is a very important issue. Obviously, it can be politicized, but really this is a safety issue. If somebody has access, going through a tough time, access to a loaded, unlocked firearm, it's certainly increases the probability that that person might die by suicide compared to other methods of suicide. Next slide. So now we think about the kind of seesaw of risk and protective factors. We talked about many of the risk factors, but it's important to understand what can we do to protect an individual, and increase those protections, to make it harder for those risk factors to kind of take over, and to tip the balance in the area of risk for suicide. So you have belongingness to people, to organizations, sharing with others, help seeking, the comfort and willingness to ask for help when you need help, hopefully early on before things get too bad. Good problem solving skills. Again, I know a lot of clinicians are on this call, so the understanding of how to regulate your emotions, how to problem solve, so that you're not making decisions, in a very kind of impulsive way, and you're using good judgment to make good decisions. Family support, employment, access to health and mental health care. These are all good protective factors against suicide. Next slide. Okay, so this next slide is suicide can be very complex to think about, many different risk factors. So what we've tried to do is distill all the research and all the different theories and best practices into understanding suicide in kind of two different pathways. One is, how do you stop people's pain? Many research studies have interviewed people who have attempted suicide and survived, and the question is, why? What was your motivation? What were you trying to kind of achieve by attempting suicide? Many people will say, I just wanted to stop the pain, the emotional pain, the relationship pain, physical pain, usually pain. I just don't want to go on anymore. I just want to stop it. And so how do we prevent or stop people's pain, making their life more manageable in terms of having a job, having, the Maslow hierarchy of needs, having, enough food, having shelter, making sure that those things are in place are very important. Sometimes we kind of assume that those are taken care of, or maybe not think about those kind of essential factors when we're thinking about suicide prevention. But we know that in certain countries, if you increase the employment rate and you increase minimum wage, suicide rates go down. And that's not just a frivolous correlation. That's very meaningful. People have the ability to thrive and take care of themselves. It's very important. Access and delivery of care. So making sure people can get the help and treatment that they need to talk to somebody. The different types of, talking to people. It doesn't always have to be, mental health treatment, but other things. Again, feeling connected to people so that a person doesn't feel like they're all alone. that can certainly help stop some of the pain if they have somebody to share the pain with. Coping and, problem solving, having those skills are very important in stopping the pain. And then the other pathway is making it harder to attempt suicide. So making sure that we're talking about suicide in the proper framework, and not glorifying those people who die by suicide and make it sound like a hopeless journey if somebody's going through a difficult time. And those specific words that are really important, sometimes you hear commit suicide. That's a word that we really need to be careful with, because if you think about how commit is used, the person's committed to the hospital, to the psych hospital, or the person is committed a sin or committed a crime. These are, associations in our mind that have negative meaning. So committing suicide is something we have to be really careful of. And there's been some good research that using those terms does affect the way people think about themselves and about having suicide ideation. It can increase the stigma. Successful suicide attempt, a completer, a person who completed suicide. Again, these terms are not the way we want to talk about suicide. You probably have already heard me say it at least maybe 10 or 15 times already. Died by suicide is the proper term to use. We also want to normalize help seeking, have a culture that makes it, easier to access, help and care, whatever that might be. And then we also, of course, around lethal means, we want to make it more difficult for somebody to access a lethal means of suicide, especially if they're going through a tough time. Next slide.
Sure. Adam, real quick, do you know if these slides will be available to the attendees, or is this something that is exclusive and proprietary through the Columbia Gatekeeper team?
I can share them. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So they'll be available to everyone. These slides. In the second half, those slides will not. It varies presenter to presenter. So thank you for sharing, Adam. Sure. And we don't have a questions tab. If you have questions as Adam's speaking, put them in the chat, and then Adam will ask you at the end.
Thank you. So a community approach to and public health approach to suicide. So we know that, again, one approach won't cut it when it comes to an issue that is so, it definitely taps into multiple domains of our human existence. You've got your interpersonal, you've got your individual, you have your biological aspects, environmental. So we need to think about this again holistically. We've done some good research about why service members, veterans may not want to ask help. We have the three listed here, but the one that we have just become more aware of is this idea of many service members want to fix their own problem. And the majority of veterans, I believe over 80%, are male. And there's also, this male kind of stereotype is that you can't ask for help. You have to be the strong one. You have to fix everything on your own. And then you couple that with the military kind of warrior ethos, which is, I need to be self-reliant. If I'm downrange, if I have been, deployed, or I am on a training exercise and something is broken or something needs to be fixed, I have to do it myself. I don't ask for other people's help. So that's something that we have to be aware of, is how do you approach veterans in kind of a non-threatening way, understanding that it might be difficult for them to ask you to help them fix, a problem, or help them kind of ease the burden of the problem. That is something that we definitely need to think about. The other one is perception of being broken. I'm less than. Certainly, being independent, being strong in the military certainly is a strong value that is definitely instilled in service members. Confidentiality concerns that go into jeopardizing a person's career in the military, asking if you need help for mental health issues can sometimes, it can affect your ability to do a particular job in the military. For some pilots, if you're taking medication for your mood or things like that, it could affect your ability to fly and to be deployed. So these are all things that you need to consider when approaching a veteran and thinking about their mental health needs. Is, putting them at ease, talking about confidentiality, talking about what your care, your documentation will and will not influence. It's very important. Next slide. So now some facts about suicide. Many of these facts we want to make sure that people know, because if people have disinformation about suicide, it could get in the way of doing something, acting, reaching out to somebody and helping them. So we want to make sure we all have the most current information, and our knowledge about suicide has certainly changed and developed quite a bit, especially since I was trained as a clinician. We've evolved into thinking differently about suicide. So we'll go over those facts here in the next few slides. So misconception is most people who think about suicide die by suicide. So about less than 1% of people who think about suicide actually die by suicide. And a lot of people think that suicide operates on a kind of a linear line. So you think about suicide, then you attempt suicide, then you die by it. And that's how people kind of follow. What we know is that many people have thoughts. The severity may differ based on the person and the situation. But then, there's some people that, are in a very difficult situation, kind of experience, a really, again, a kind of a catastrophic event, and they don't really have a lot of thoughts about it. And they go from that moment of despair to attempting suicide. So there isn't always, lots of ideation and then attempting and then dying. You don't always see that happen. Next slide. So only clinicians can or should work in suicide prevention. We want to make sure we dispel this myth. We need everybody to be involved. Need lots of people to be engaged with human beings. Engagement, caring for others, noticing if a person's going through a tough time, and when necessary, asking them about their risk for suicide. The idea that people will just come to us in our clinical offices or to the veteran clinics or the hospital. We know with very good research that doesn't happen. Only a small proportion of veterans who die by suicide ever got to a mental health clinician or got to formalized care. So again, we need to go out to them. There is some mistrust. There is some hesitance and resistance to come forward and get help. So we need a new approach, which is going out to the veterans and reaching them. Next slide. So owning a firearm is not associated with suicide risk. We bring up the issue of firearms because, again, it is by far the most common method of suicide, especially in the veteran population, but also in the overall civilian population. And many studies have shown this over and over again, that if you have a firearm in the home, it increases the risk for those people in the home, not just the person who owns the gun, increases the home's risk, the people in the home's risks by anywhere from 4 and sometimes 8 to 10 times, some new studies are showing. So we need to be aware of how veterans, especially veterans, but everyone is securing firearms, because this not only affects, again, the veteran, but many children. Access to an unlocked loaded firearm can increase risk for suicide for children who live in the home as well. Next slide. So again, talking about method of suicide, since it's by far the most empirically tested, it's the most evidence we have to prevent suicide, is to do something about how, or the method of suicide. Is if you remove access. So for example, if you remove firearms, or when a person's going through a tough time, they're just going to go ahead and find a different way to die by suicide. They use a different method. This is a very important myth to dispel, because if people believe this, they're not going to do anything about safe storage of firearms or safe storage of medications. They think that a person will just use something else. It's absolutely false. Very few people, in fact, if you're able to make it more difficult for somebody to access the method of suicide that is in that person's environment, that person will 93% of the time go on and live if they've tried to attempt with something. So most people don't go on and attempt again and die. In fact, the really interesting study with the Golden Gate Bridge over the last 50 to I think 75 years, about I think about 70 people have survived jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. And some of those people have gone on and died of natural causes, but none of the people who have jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge have gone on to die by suicide. So that tells us something, where if we can prevent a person accessing a lethal means of suicide, we can save their life for the long term. Next slide. So sometimes suicide, in many cases, can be very quick. The transition from thinking about suicide to attempting can be less than 10 minutes. So you really need to make sure that we're aware of this impulsivity with suicide. So we're always needing to track how a person is doing. Are there any changes? We need to do multiple check-ins with people. This idea that we just, ask them one time and then we don't assess them for suicide risk anymore. This needs to be a continuous thing that we do. Next slide. So about 25 to 40% of individuals who have attempted suicide made the final decision to go from thinking about suicide to attempting within 5 minutes, and 70% under an hour. Next slide. So another big myth that we need to make sure that we're not spreading or perpetuating is this idea that if we talk about suicide, we ask about suicide, then we will give that person the idea or increase their risk. Multiple studies, we've got one source down here, but there's many more that have shown that the reverse. So if you actually ask somebody about suicide risk, it's usually a relief. A person is relieved that somebody's asking them about suicide and that you can have an open dialogue about it. So we need to make sure that we're educating everyone that it's not, if you bring up the topic, that you're somehow going to increase suicide. That doesn't happen. Next slide. Okay. Another really important myth, certainly one that traditionally, like in the 1970s, some of us are familiar with the DSM. DSM-3 suicide was actually a symptom of depression. And so I think what is important here is that I just saw something pop up on the chat. So in many cases, suicide is definitely impulsive. It can be very quick from somebody experiencing a stressor and then attempting suicide. That can be very impulsive. Just want to make sure that's clear. So this other misconception is that everyone who dies by suicide has a psychiatric or mental illness. This is something that's been dispelled, especially in the last 10 years. There's a great book, if some of you are interested in it, is Rethinking Suicide by Craig Bryan. Really talks about why did we start thinking that everybody who dies by suicide is mentally ill. And he talks about why, and it has lots to do with a psychiatric autopsy and trying to recreate why somebody died by suicide after they died. And unfortunately, there's some major flaws in trying to recreate how somebody died by suicide, especially when you're asking family members how that person felt, if they were depressed before they died, for example. Very difficult to recreate that accurately. So that's unfortunately kind of how we got this idea that everybody who dies by suicide is mentally ill. Important that we understand that, you know, more than half of people don't have a mental health issue when they die by suicide. That helps us understand who we're looking for. Traditionally, looking for somebody who's chronically depressed, maybe they have schizophrenia, bipolar. Now we need to understand, we're looking for, you know, we need to understand everybody's experiences, because depending on what they go through and what happens to them, they could be at risk for suicide, even if they're not experiencing symptoms of a mental illness. So this helps us broaden our view of who we need to be aware of, and you know, we need to be aware of all of us, and to make sure everybody's okay. Next slide. So deployment increases suicide risk among veterans or service members. So it depends what the deployment was. Again, many research studies, if your experience on deployment was combat related, if you were a witness of seeing a fellow Marine or soldier die by suicide or be shot in combat, that certainly affects your mental health, the service member's mental health, and could increase risk for suicide. However, just if you're deployed, yes or no, training, exercise, or deployed to do other things, doesn't increase suicide risk. It's what happens on the deployment that matters. So that's something that you explore with a veteran, at the appropriate time. Next slide.
Sure. We do have a hard stop for the part 2 in 10 minutes, and we still have just a quick time check for you.
Okay, I'll keep moving. All right. So as we talked about, this is a problem that affects many people, especially many first responders, but it's something that we can work together to prevent. Next slide. So we understand now that suicide death affects many more people than we thought. Originally, we thought it may affect, close members, close family members of the person who's died by suicide, maybe 5 or 6 people. We actually know now that it affects 135 people, and that many people around that person are affected by their death. So it's something that we need to talk openly about, and help the people that are affected by the person's death. Next slide. Suicide does not discriminate. It, affects everyone, young, old, different backgrounds, in different countries, different, genders, races. So it's not something that just affects one type of person. Next slide. And so, as I said earlier, we got to get out of our idea that, if somebody is really suffering, they're always going to come to us. We got to go out and find different ways to find people who are suffering in silence. Next slide. Okay, just a point on loneliness. Loneliness is something that affects our physiology and our mental health. It's really important to make connections with people and help them develop maybe a better social network. We're all social creatures. We all need connections with others. It's really important that we're aware of how people can become isolated. Next slide. Okay, so I wanted to go over, this is the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale. This is the screener version. I know that some clinicians, including myself, may use a larger, longer version that goes into more detail, but this has similar psychometric properties, effectiveness in identifying the most important parts of risk. So I'll take you through these questions and go over how you use it. It has a lot of research. Many articles have been published on whether or not this scale can identify people at risk, for attempting suicide, dying by suicide. It does have some studies that show that if a person is talking about, especially intent to die, that, if they say this, that if they're not intervened with, they could go on and die by suicide. So these questions and these words have been very well thought out and rigorously studied. And the order in which you ask the questions is very important. And the certain words have been chosen. They get at ideation, intent, and then behaviors. It's very important that you use the words and use the questions in order. So number one, have you wished you were dead or wished you could go to sleep and not wake up? This gets at the kind of ambiguous, kind of vague, passive thoughts of suicide. Then number two, you ask, have you actually had thoughts of killing yourself? Actually had thoughts. And then number three, so if you get yes to number two, you go to number three. Have you been thinking about how you might do this? So there is this starting to think about, you're going from thinking about suicide, now coming up with a potential plan of how you might go ahead and attempt suicide. And then number four is when you transition from thinking and maybe planning to intent. So number four, have you had these thoughts and had some intention of acting on them? As opposed to, I have the thought, but I definitely would not do anything about it. So this is intent. And in the research, this is kind of where you start to see the severity play out. If somebody has intent to any part of them wanting to die by suicide, this is where their risk definitely increases. And then number five, have you started to work out or worked out the details of how to kill yourself? And then do you intend to carry out this plan? So here again, you've got intent and now you have a plan and you're starting to work out the specific parts of that plan. And then number six, have you ever done anything, started to do anything or prepare to do anything to end your life? So previous behaviors. So have you gone down this road before? Have you collected pills? Do you have a firearm that's ready to go that you would use? So you can see how, you start off with vague passive ideation, then you go into thoughts of actually killing yourself, and then thinking about a plan, and then intent. When you start to transition to 3 to 4, you go from, at the beginning, no risk, and then 3 is mild risk, and then 4 and 5 are high risk. And then 6 is previous behaviors, which is very important to assess for as well. So as you can tell, 1 and asking 1 and 2 takes about 30 seconds. The majority of people that you talk to are going to fall in that 1 or 2 range. And many times you don't go beyond number 2. About 1% of the people that you assess will be in that 4 to saying yes to number 4 or 5 and high risk. So again, very few people will be in that area. But that's why this scale is important, so you can understand the level of risk, because not everybody needs to go to a hospital, for example. If people are at low risk, they don't, just because they might be thinking about, kind of vague thoughts of suicide, doesn't mean they need to go to a hospital, which is really important, because for many, going to the hospital can be traumatizing and can be stigmatizing as well. Next slide. So this scale is available. The Columbia Lighthouse website has the app. It has the QR code. You can go and get the cards and the actual scale and print it off and use it, or you can put it on your phone and have the scale for you on your phone. Next slide. So again, this is just talking about who you need to really worry about, the high-risk individuals, in endorsing, intent and plan, 4 and 5, and also sex previous behaviors. Next slide. So I'm going to go ahead and go through these very quickly. I think a lot of people here are clinicians or understand. I can't tell you how important it is, the person asking these questions. So we talk about therapeutic alliance. We talk about therapeutic rapport, the relationship. It's really important. You can develop a rapport and relationships with people very quickly, but it's important to, show genuine compassion and empathy when you're asking these questions. It increases the validity of the answers if you can have a connection with somebody, develop that connection, and show compassion. They're going to be much more likely to be forthcoming in their answers. Next slide. So you can just keep going here. This shows some different tips on how to show empathy, show that you're listening. Really important to not judge and to listen carefully and paraphrase. All good, listening and empathy skills that we would use in any other type of interactions with our clients or just with people in general. Next slide. And then next slide. So, if they're in that imminent risk area, you certainly would want to consider, if they have an intent to die and they have a plan, certainly would want to think about 988 or talking to a therapist, if they have a therapist, talking to a clinician, getting an appointment, and working with that person to be seen. But if they're in the low risk area, if they're just having a tough time, having kind of ambiguous thoughts of suicide, it's important to get them to talk to somebody. It doesn't always have to be a therapist. It can be, maybe somebody in their faith community. It could be somebody, like a life coach. It could be somebody a peer that's good at listening, a good trusted family member, just somebody that they can feel connected with. But again, we got to make sure that we're not just kicking everybody to the hospital if they bring up the word suicide. It's very important. Next slide. Okay, so again, the scale is here. So you have the full scale and how it works, yes and no, and the color coding again. But this is available on the website and in an app. Next slide. Here's the download here, if people want to download it. And then open for questions. I know we only have a few minutes left.
Please type your questions in the chat. Adam, do you want me to go through the rest of the slides, the other two, or is that just bookends?
Yeah, just bookends. You can go to the last one. You can reach out to us right there. And the person I work with, Dr. Kelly Posner, there's her email. Mine's the same except for Adam.Walsh if you want to reach out to me.
Great question from John. Is this mostly for veterans or can this be used for everyone?
So, this is tailored towards veterans because the specific, as you can tell, the risk factors and some of the data that we've talked about, but the actual Columbia scale can be used for anyone. Yep, absolutely.
And since we have all these social workers and all these clinicians, is your team available to do these sorts of trainings for our attendees?
Sure, absolutely.
All right, Britton asks, can you give thoughts about your experience with safety planning?
Sure. Use both the safety planning and the crisis response plan. The Columbia scale does a nice job of connecting to using one of those tools. So again, if you're, even if they're saying yes to two and then no to the rest of them. You come up with a nice crisis response plan, safety plan, and it can be used well. But again, this needs to be a living document. The most success I've had with safety planning is you do it together, you develop it together, and your client, whoever that might be, really takes ownership of that plan, and they feel like they have helped you develop it, and the information on there is something that they truly believe in, and you as the therapist have really supported them in developing. Those are really important parts of that.
Okay, and just Samantha asked why the training was listed from 2:30 to 5. We're doing this 1 hour that's wrapping now of Gatekeeper training, which Adam just did, and then we're going to roll into a panel where we are going to have veterans who themselves had that experience. So for the last question, Adam, someone asked about post-vention or like post-suicide, death by suicide support. Do you have any recommendations for that?
Sure. There's, I think, I work very closely with TAPS in the Department of Defense. They're very good. Worked with them very closely. They do great survivor camps for people who have attempted suicide or are grieving a lost service member because of suicide. There's also a lot of post-vention materials out there. If you're interested in them, I can certainly send you toolkits and guides on post-vention.
Thank you so much, Adam. This was amazing. Guys, could you please put like some thank yous for Adam in the chat? He came here to share his expertise with us. He's making his expertise available to all of you through the follow-up slides that you will get. It's always a pleasure to have a subject matter expert like him come on here and share his time with us. So now we're going to move into the second portion of our suicide prevention panel, which is Aynisa is going to run a Q&A with veterans who have themselves had experiences with suicidality. So thank you guys for joining us, and thank you, Adam. You're welcome to stay, and Aynisa, take it away.
Great presentation, Adam. Such an important topic to talk about. I will always say, like, that's one of my favorite topics, is talking about suicide, which sounds so weird when you say it that way. And it really is, because like it saves lives talking about topics like this, because it's spoken about, it's swept under the rug, stigmatized, all of the things that Adam kind of highlighted. So, and it's also difficult to talk about. Like, survivors of suicide don't always want to talk about what went wrong and what went right. And that's really what we're here to do today with some wonderful empowered voices of specifically veteran survivors who have either had attempts or been on the brink of just hopelessness and are open to sharing their stories with us. I believe that is probably the best education format, is setting the stage for people to tell their personal stories and us learning from them. So I'm always grateful for NASW for hosting these wonderful events and using panels of lived experience from veterans themselves to highlight these topics that are, like I said, not spoken about enough. So our topic for today, Adam set the stage beautifully for us to kind of go into the depth of some of our veteran panelists and their stories, what they've been through, what's worked, what didn't work, and the layers and dimensions of suicidality and depression and anxiety and hopelessness. And then on the other side, things that have helped pull them out of that and empowered them on the side of recovery, really. So without further ado, I want to turn it over and introduce our panelists. And then just my job is to moderate and set the stage for them to tell their stories. So we have, I believe it's 5 panelists today. And everyone's kind of mixed up on the screen, so I can't see everyone in a row, but I think
we can try spotlighting you and see if that works. See if spotlight.
Yeah, let's try that with the panelists too.
All right, so I'm going to start with you. Spotlight for everyone. Continue, and then I'm gonna, let's see what happens. Add spotlight. Oh, okay, yes. So I'm gonna start hunting down our our panelists.
So our panelists for today are Casey, Dani, Brent, Alyssa, and Michael. And these are 5 individuals who are absolutely incredible forces for good in the community, who have really important stories to share. So I'm going to just ask a few kind of general questions. We all met prior to really talk about what was important to them for today. And I tried to pull some questions based on that. But panelists and attendees, keep in mind that these tend to be organic and kind of flow with the content as we go. So we may change the pattern and the script up a little bit as we go, but that's what makes this so significant. So first of all, can you each introduce yourself and just why this panel topic is important to you? Dani, do you mind starting with you?
Sure. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. This is a topic that is very close to my heart as someone who has suffered with suicidality since I was about 10, and still to this day have found many resources to help, but wouldn't say it's been an easy road. I am a LCAP. I'm soon to have my licensed creative arts therapist. I have a CASAC-P, so I'll also be a CASAC as well soon. I'm in the mental health field. I work with veterans and substance abuse in a outpatient facility. I also am the head of the Northport VA Veteran Suicide Coalition, where we try to collaborate with the resources here in Suffolk County on Long Island for veterans so that they know all of the benefits that are available to them and how to access them, because I believe that access to care is the most important thing. And that's where we're really going to see the numbers of suicide go down, because if we have access to care and we close those barriers, then people can actually start getting the help that they deserve. There's just a lot of red tape and a lot of programming that needs to be created so that veterans can actually be part of something that's benefited for them and specialized for them as well.
Dani, did you also mention your branch and when you served, if you don't mind?
About that. Yes, I was a military police officer alongside Alyssa. She was an officer. I was enlisted. So yeah, 31 Bravo for 4 years, and active duty.
Thank you. I should have qualified before. I am not a veteran. I'm a clinician. I've had the honor and privilege of working with veterans for about 17 years. So that's where I've learned actually more than from textbooks, but from the wonderful veteran clients I worked with, had the pleasure of working with. So again, it's not my story today. It's my job to moderate, and the veterans on the panel will share their stories with you. So Michael, I'm just going to go in a row just for this question because it's kind of like a general question. And then after that, we'll go a little bit deeper. But Michael, can you just tell us why this topic is important to you?
Yes, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You can hear me okay, right? Beautiful. So it's such a pleasure and honor to even be here. Just like everybody said, it's such an important thing. I have 5 kids. I got a service dog myself. I'm a combat Marine. I served from 99 to 03. And, I was part of the initial invasion March 20th in 2003. So everything, a lot of things that Adam has touched on, and those PowerPoints, those are real to me. I now, I had so much dangerous jobs in the beginning because I couldn't sleep. I didn't know I had a lot of the stuff that I deal with currently as a disabled veteran. However, it's important to me because every day I live for my family. I live for myself now. And so I'm able to help other people. I'm a veteran advocate through an organization. It's a non-for-profit called Paws of War, where we help veterans and first responders with service animals. And when I tell you it's life-changing work, this is my mission to help my other brothers and sisters who have served in the same position that I was in, because I cannot let another brother or my sister be left behind, knowing what the reality could be in their minds or in their hearts. So to transform that, or to help guide and cultivate a positive outcome, a positive future for my brothers, that's what I'm here for. So I thank you all for even tuning in. And there's a lot of people in here that obviously feel that, many hands make light work. And that's what this is about. If more people could be awareness, and every single person on this feed could tell just one person of how to prevent, or things that from each panel that has worked, or maybe not, then maybe our brothers and sisters will be better off in this case. So thank you for that.
Well said, Michael. Thank you. Brent, how about you? What compelled you to be part of this today?
My name is Brent Russell. I'm the Director of Veteran Services at the Mental Health Association in Nassau County, where we house the PFC Drive Peer Support Project of Nassau County. And I feel like it's I also served. I'm an Army veteran. I served from 90 to 92, a little bit under 2 years. I was released with an honorable medical discharge. I believe that suicide is a very important topic, and it's a very important issue to deal with, to help save lives. And not only to help save lives, but also to help people live fulfilling lives. Once you kind of get the grip and the understanding of how to navigate through life, it can be a really, really beautiful and wonderful thing. And so I think this is a very, very important topic.
Thank you, Brent. Casey, why is this topic important to you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Casey Lancaster. I work for Ford Health, as you can see my level of background. I'm also a Marine Corps veteran. I served with the 1st Battalion 3rd Marines from 2007 to 2012. I got to go to the lovely countries of Iraq and Afghanistan, and during my time over there, I was in the infantry. I was a machine gunner, so got to do a lot of combat missions and experiences, and lost a lot of friends while over there. Once I got out of the Marine Corps, I was very much pretty much all the classic symptoms, signs, and struggles. Struggling with reintegration, finding a job, finding work, feeling a sense of normalcy and feeling like I had purpose, and really just getting reconnected with being a civilian. And through those struggles, I ended up attempting suicide with a .45 caliber pistol. Really did some damage to myself and my face, and went through about 8 to 9 months of recovering from the gunshot wound. Laid out in the VA and was going through a lot of surgeries and whatnot. Got introduced to the company that I work at now as government relations and a corporate analyst, as well as teaching classes and working with our clinicians and our partners on military culture, suicide prevention, and work like that. So now I pretty much go about and share my story with everyone. And why it's important to me is because I want to prevent my brothers and sisters in the service from going through what I went through. I struggled really hard with survivor's guilt from the guys that I lost, and I struggled a lot with feeling very isolated and feeling alone. And when I did reach out to the VA, this isn't a dig at the VA, but when I did reach out to them, they pretty much turned me away, and I had a bad experience with them. And since then, I've just been working really hard to improve that and ensure that other veterans know that there are more resources out there and there are more ways to get help, not just the VA. And so that's why it's important to me, why I do what I do. So thank you for having me here, and I appreciate y'all's time.
Thank you, Casey. Alyssa, how about you?
Hi, my name is Alyssa Carrion. I'm a U.S. Army vet. I served from 2004 to 2012 as an MP officer. I have struggled with suicidality since getting out of the military. Finding a purpose has really been hard for me until I found this job at Mental Health America. I'm currently the director of veterans programs here. And I spend my time making sure that no other vet goes through that lonely, isolated phase alone, because I know what it feels like and I've been there, and I want to make sure that no one else has to go through that by themselves.
All right, thank you all for introducing yourself and talking about why this topic, why this group and why this topic. So I mentioned before some of the dimensions that kind of brings people down that road of hopelessness and suicidality. And understanding that can apply to both civilians and veterans, of course. What the question to the panel is, what do you think are veteran-specific issues that you want these attendees today to be aware of that correlate to those possible thoughts of like hopelessness or despair that could lead to suicidality?
I
saw a hand. Did you get? Yes, go ahead.
So as a veteran who struggles with suicidality and as a clinician, I see it firsthand based off of my transition out of the military and as a art therapist who does a lot of case management. So for me, and my experience, I was in 2 Humvee rollovers. I fractured my back. I'm a victim of military sexual trauma. I was one of the first females in combat arms as an MP. So I was 1 female to a 40-man platoon, which you can imagine wasn't very easy. I was overseas where I had my injury, and I fought 8 years to get my disability claim. So that kind of encompasses where my struggles began, because when I left the military, I had to leave on a medical discharge. I didn't want to leave. I loved being in the military. I loved my leadership. I loved my MOS and my job, but I could no longer complete the mission because of my injury. I also had a daughter at 6 months old. We were home in 2015, back to Long Island. There was no veteran programs for females. There was no, you couldn't even apply for disability benefits for MST at that time. It didn't even exist in 2015. I had put in some claims while I was in Fort Drum as I was transitioning, which helped me because I had current documentation, but I was still denied. So I was denied for 8 years, and then I finally fought and got it. Recently, which was 2 years ago, I got my 100% disability, but it first started off 0, and then 30, and then 70, and then 100. And I never stopped because I knew what was owed to me. But that was a fight that I fought by myself. I didn't use lawyers. I didn't use some of these great organizations that they have now that can fight for through lawyers and different ways. And they have changed a lot too. So the veteran system for disability compensation has changed a lot over the years, which is helpful. But before, it was incredibly hard. So now you have veterans who are disabled and who don't have that distinction. They can't access care. So veterans who are dishonorably discharged, veterans who are other than honorably discharged, do not have all the access to cares that honorable discharges have. So they don't have employment opportunity, they don't have housing programs, they don't have access to medical care. And I don't think that a lot of people understand that these are huge barriers to their service, because they did serve, but they are seen as a dishonor, so therefore they don't access what they should have. And I remember being an honorably discharged veteran and going to Northport VA, and similar to Casey, and being pushed away and turned away. And I was so exhausted from trying. And I was a single mom. I was in a 1-bedroom apartment in a house that was in foreclosure. I had my husband at the time who had PTSD and combat stress, and a 6-month-old, and we were just trying to get by, and we couldn't get food stamps. We couldn't get into school right away. And then we finally did. And then things started to change. So when I was in school, I was working 2 jobs. It was the stress of having everything around me that I felt in no control. I lost my routine, I lost my title, I lost all the things and had to regain it again. And when a lot of people leave for the military, we're leaving a toxic family system or a place that there's no advancement. And then we go in a place, we find all the great things and we build ourselves up and we build all these skills and we come back and those places haven't changed. Their family hasn't changed. The society hasn't changed, if not has gotten worse. And as a military police officer, I had all of these great certifications and experience and talent, but I broke my back. I couldn't use that. Same thing for infantry. If you're an infantryman getting out of the military, your job skills are not going to align into something unless you're doing law enforcement or like security. And so employment is huge. Support is huge. Having a community is huge. And so when you don't have any of those things, that's when the isolation comes in, and that's when the despair comes, and that's when you start not being able to really adapt to society again after that transition.
I took a couple notes while you were talking, Dani, because that was a lot of great content for us to refer back to. And it really did explain so many of the layers of potential challenge and struggle that a veteran could go through transitioning. So we'll revisit some of that, I'm sure, but thanks for explaining it so well. And others, we don't have to go in order anymore. So does anything else come to mind in terms of veteran-specific challenges that could lead down that road of hopelessness? Casey? We'll go Casey, then Michael. Perfect.
Thank you. And Danny, yeah, just trying to get involved with the VA and trying to get care, it literally took me pulling the trigger for the VA to go, oh, hey, there's something wrong with you. We might need to talk to you. And so my suicide attempt was back in 2016, and 2 weeks ago, I just got approved for 90% disability. I'm still not even at 100%, and my PTSD is at 70%. The other disability ratings that I have are various different injuries, my back and things like that, because, being infantry, they just beat the hell out of you and go, all right, you're good, and kick you back out. So, trying to streamline that and getting involved, no matter what it is, John, all these different resources, that was not a thing. That didn't help. It took me actually hurting myself for them to even recognize that there was something going on. And then they wanted to become my best friends, but that's not how that works now. So, it really was losing a sense of purpose and losing like that camaraderie that you had, having your brothers with you all the time, having someone to talk to and rely on, and then going from that to being back to nothing was where a lot of my struggles was coming from. Because as Danny, you really just pointed everything out. Being infantry, I only have a certain skill set, and that's pulling the trigger and hurting people. That doesn't really translate very well into a resume besides showing leadership skills. Like that can look good in some aspects, but all the jobs I was doing was just all security. Everything was armed, having to wear uniforms again, rocking the gat and freaking, keeping the hair nice and short and doing things like that. You don't connect well because some of the guys that I was working with, they weren't military. So I was kind of a grow vet, and I was that asshole that was like, you didn't serve, so I'm not going to show you any respect. And as I grew up and learned, you can't really behave like that, which, it's that contributed to some of my struggle. I just did not get along with a lot of people, and that was costing me my job. I was very angry and tempered, and, being a Marine, we have that mentality of we are very much better than everyone else in the world. We are jolly green giants who walk the world, and that is what I was.
The proud, the lonely.
Yeah, very much so. And so experiencing that I created self-isolation without even really thinking about it. It just, the more I was around people, the more I was like, I don't like people. And I got in that small little box of just, I'm kind of by myself now. And then so my experience of suicide was not like, I don't like myself, I'm off myself. It very much is just like, I'm not doing well here, I'm not doing well there. And then I started doing the drinking, and I started just going out and partying and doing whatever I could to disassociate and disconnect from what my struggles were, just to feel somewhat normal. And we talked about, and I'm gonna screw up this word because I don't speak English, impulsiveness. Yeah. That's very true. I went out, got drunk, came home, I got Taco Bell, I was playing video games, and then when I came to, I was in the hospital. And they're like, cool, man, you just attempted suicide. I'm like, don't remember doing that. I do now that I've done a lot of therapy and had to sit there and rethink about everything over and over again. I've put together little blips and blurs that have come back to me, that I just started thinking about some stuff, and things just led one thing to another. And it was very much a very impulsive, non-planned, just, I was really happy like the day before, and tonight I was not feeling it. And yeah, it's just that those are kind of things when I've talked to other veterans that they've struggled with as well. Finding that brotherhood, finding that bond, that sense of purpose again, and feeling like they're doing something that's worthwhile. Because when you go through boot camp, you go through all this training, they grind that into your head that what you're doing is the only thing that matters. Nothing else in this world matters. The mission comes first. Your brothers and sisters come first. And then when you get out of that type of environment, you're like, well, wait a minute, what am I doing now? How do I do this? How do I be a member of society? And I feel like a lot of veterans struggle with that and make some impulsive decisions like me.
Well said. Other things that come to mind with this question, Michael, go ahead.
So, like my brother said just now, as a combat guy, I was in 2-1. That was my unit, right? And we took over Qasr, Azabayer, and Azabayer that in Nasiriyah that allowed everybody else to infiltrate. And when I got out, I got stop-lost a couple months. And just like my buddy was saying, it was very hard to connect with the outside world to veterans. I didn't realize that I said earlier, I had as much as the stuff that I'm dealing with now. I mean, I work 24 hours a day. I try to go to school. I was a bounty hunter, personal security. I did bouncing in very sketchy areas where I had to wear a vest the majority of times. And if you're a bad guy, I'm smashing your heads. And not until I got hurt and I was like, whoa, I think this is something that like I need more calm and more peace. But I couldn't find my footing, and I needed that adrenaline rush. The same thing when you see the arty or your rounds coming over and bypassing you in combat. I needed that feeling over and over and over again. And I needed that camaraderie. For me, I didn't trust anybody. And when I say anybody, I didn't trust anybody. Whether it's and not until I was about to smash my car in a wall, or I couldn't shave because I was going to put my razor across my neck, that they were forced to go into the VA to get help. And I went into the internal psychiatric unit in the VA, 22, and weekend turned into 30 days. And then I went to the PTSD unit. That's a 3-month program. I ended up 4 months the first time. They let me out at the holiday, And I told you guys, I have 5 kids. I have 4 cats. There's so many people around me really all the time, but yet I was like the loneliest person in the world. I didn't know how to speak to my wife. I didn't know how to really say the need that I needed because I really did not know. It wasn't until I got out and then someone was saying, for me, I think a service dog will be helpful to you. I was 275 pounds and my isolation was like 2 to 3 years. And that isolation was killing me. To this day, I will not go to stores, by myself without my service dog, but she is my lifeline. She is my backup. And that's what had kept me going in the sound. And even in my own state of mind, I have my dog to alert me when I am feeling things that I'm not really, maybe something new, or I'm familiar with this and may do a tapping thing, or, with crowds or whatever the circumstance may be, she's able to back me up. And so I was able to find something that would work, but yet I still was not able to find another brother Marine. I wasn't able to find another soldier that really understand what I was going through, to have that buddy system. Like, hey, are you okay? Or hey, just get over it. You're just stressed. No, I was beyond stressed. I was the only one working for 15 years. And so the world was literally on my shoulders. I couldn't lift it up. And I'm a Marine. I am invincible. I am a warrior. I now, or not now, but, some time ago, I felt then broken. I couldn't get out of that. Whereas, why am I feeling this way? Why am I doing this? Either I'm going to hurt myself, I'm going to hurt somebody else. So I had to do something else different, or I'm going to lose my babies, you see? And that is always my driving force. First, it was like, hey, I got to get Mike together first, mentally, physically, and then just, I could be for my babies. Like a plane, you go on a plane, they said you have to put that oxygen mask on your face in order to help somebody else. I wasn't putting that oxygen mask on me first. I was always worried about someone else, left, right, in front of me, to the rear of me. So now I have a mission. I have a purpose. I work for a non-for-profit to where I'm able to service my brothers and sisters as veterans. And so I always tell people when I do give presentations or I'm talking to another veteran, you have no idea me speaking to you on how much it helps me to realize that someone has your back. And then I had to realize that someone has my back. And, it come with, my buddies that I met along the way. Even I've seen familiar faces in this group that a conversation or a check-in, hey, Mike, how are you? That changed my frown upside down, literally. I mean, if I can't be with my dog, that voice, or, hey, let me give you a resource or what have you, so you can maybe get some backup. But that care and that love. But I finally was able to find the unloneliness. I mean, I can't speak English again, as I'm a Marine, so figure it out. But like when you're lonely, and then that little part of you that was like, okay, I'm not really by myself. I really do have a support system, and I really can reach out without feeling that I'm burdening somebody else. The worst thing, in my opinion, and for my other brother Marines, is to burden somebody else, to have somebody else go out of the way to help me out, because I'm the savior, or I'm the warrior here, because I don't need fixing. Everybody else needs fixing. And when I came to that realization that even a machine needs tuning up, needs some oil to continue trekking on. That was the eye opener for me. And listen, I'm not saying that, in 2024, I'm freaking Santa Claus or Lucky Joe happy all the time. I have my moment, but now I'm able to recognize it a little better. I have my resources like my service dog. I have people in my corner. My only friends in my world is my best friend, my wife, and 2 other Marines. So, I just, it's hard to find that connection. It's hard to find that other person that will really understand what you're talking about. You see? So anybody on here, you could always get my number. If any of you struggling, you give me a call. Whether I could hear your phone call or not, I will speak to you, at 1, 2, 3 in the morning or 4 until, you could say, yo, Mike, I'm better than when we first spoke. You see? So there's a lot of self-help. There's a lot of eye-opening that had to be done for myself in order to continue to work with my other brothers and sisters.
Yeah, the community piece is incredibly important. I'm
Yep.
sorry, Brent, if you were going to talk, do you want to go ahead? I don't want to cut you off.
For me?
Brent, were you going to say something?
Yeah,
Oh, no.
I do want to talk,
Alyssa
but I think
has her
Alyssa had
hand
her
up,
hand
though.
up first.
Alyssa
Yeah,
had her hand up
she
too.
did. Go ahead,
Okay,
Alyssa.
come on.
So I just want to share from like my perspective what my big pitfalls were. So I was an officer. I'm a West Point grad, 2004. Our 20-year reunion is this year. When I got out, I heard a lot that I was an officer. I am a West Pointer. I should be fine. That I was given all the tools and skills necessary, that I am intelligent, and that I will be fine. The VA gave me about 8 years worth of narcotics for pain in my back and my legs when they messed up an ankle surgery. So I was addicted to narcotics for a while. I have 2 years sober now from alcohol as well. So no more narcotics, no more alcohol. I quit smoking 2 years ago. I've lost 60 pounds. I feel like I'm kind of on a good path, which is exciting for me. But I also struggle with mental health conditions that exacerbate my suicidality. So I am also bipolar and suffer from major depressive disorder. So adding those to the mix was a lot of fun. I am constantly medicated. For anybody who lives with bipolar disorder, you know that we're really good at going off our meds. So that's part of my struggle is I feel fine. I don't need meds. And then a couple months later, I will hit a low cycle and it will be like, oh my God, I am not okay. And I should have been taking my meds. So I have been consistently on my meds for about 4 years now, which is a really great streak for me. But reintegrating into society was just something I couldn't do. And you would think, here's all these tools that we've given you, go be a leader, go work in corporate America. I couldn't do it. It didn't feel like I had a purpose. And I went home every day and cried. I was having panic attacks in the parking lot at work. And I quit my job at the beginning of the pandemic and then sat at home for 2 weeks and cried because I didn't know what I was going to do. But I walked away from that job because it was destroying my mental health. And then I found this job and I have spent 4.5 years now dedicating myself to other veterans. And I feel like finding that purpose was integral in my recovery.
First of all, I just want to say I feel really honored to be on this panel with you guys. You guys are amazing. When I left the military, actually before I joined the military, I had issues with my parents. I had different traumas in my life from moving to different neighborhoods. And one of the reasons why I joined the military was because I wanted to feel better about myself. And so there was some self-esteem issues that were present before I joined the military. And when I joined the military, all of that went away. Right. So I guess what I want to put on your radar is that before I joined the military, and you know, it's 1 + 1 = 2, right? But before I joined the military, I was already traumatized. I already had some rocks in my backpack. I already had some issues. And before I was released from the military with an honorable medical discharge, my troop deployed to go to the Middle East, and I couldn't go. I couldn't go because I hurt myself. I blew my knee out and I hurt myself. And all of those feelings of low self-esteem and low self-worth actually came back. And my answer to that was substance use. And that was what I did for years. So I didn't really reintegrate back into society till about maybe 16 years ago, because that's how long I had played. You know, and I got out of the military in '92. So, you know, you do the math. It was a while. I flopped around. I had no idea, but I reached a point in my life where there was so much pain, and that's something else I want to put on your radar, that there was so much pain that I was going through that I felt that if I took my life, I'd be better off. You know, and it didn't work for me. I just have to be completely and totally honest. I tried to slip my wrist, but the shit hurt so bad that I stopped. Right. But what I did do was I proceeded to use drugs and try to kill myself that way. You know, and I put myself in so many different unsafe situations, and I really didn't give or care too much about myself or my well-being. You know, and you know, one of the things that keeps popping up for us, I think we've all mentioned it, is the camaraderie. And that was something that I was missing. That was something that was directly connected to my self-worth and about me feeling good about myself. And you know, and I found it again, and I was searching for a very, very long time, and I found it in work. Kind of like you, Alyssa, I kind of, you know, my job is part of my lifeline, you know, because it allows me, I'm under the impression that I'm still serving in the military because I'm still serving with veterans and family members as well. That's a plus, right? To help each other and to support each other. And I'm just blessed by it.
We're so blessed to have Brent. I live in Long Island, so I have Brent. Everyone else lives in other states and counties, so you guys don't get Brent. But
Not Mike.
Oh, hey! Yes. So Warrior Ranch was pivotal to my transition for community and camaraderie. So is Paws of War as well for me. Out of Smithtown, I started when I came out, right? I was waiting to go to school. I was working in a deli. Then I became a cook. Then I became a teacher. Then I became a therapist. And along the way, I was going to school full time. And I became a creative arts therapist because I didn't have the verbal communication skills to express my pain, my trauma, my experience, because every time I told my story, a clinician or a psychiatrist or psychologist would look at me and said, "This sounds like a movie." And they couldn't hold my trauma. They discredited what I had been through because they were ignorant to my culture as a veteran. So I would just please beg anyone who is working with veterans to truly take the time to understand our culture and our community, because there is such differences between the branches and between enlisted and officers. And you don't want to call a Marine a sailor, because I promise ain't gonna go well. And it's a matter of respect, because we earn these titles and we earn these things. We put our bodies and our minds and our families through it. So we want to at least come to being met where we're at. Okay. So if you don't have an understanding of the veteran who's sitting in your seat, please ask questions and don't be afraid to be wrong, and do your research, because you are now their line of communication. You are now their case manager. And for me, one of my specialities in case management for my clients is documentation. And because I've worked with homeless veterans, because I've worked with sexual assault and DV, I realized that one of the best things you can do is be a safe person, have a safe space for them to go, have some room in your schedule that if they have to come to be seen, that you can throw them in there, have peers being able to talk to them if you don't have the time, and be a safe keeper of their documents. So have copies of their IDs, have copies of their social security cards, their DD-214s, hold these documents for them, because if they're homeless in the woods, they have to get this all over again. They can't access DSS, they can't access the VA if they don't have these very specific and important documents. And when someone is going through the loss of their house, divorce, domestic violence, where they feel like maybe their partner might ruin those documents or take those documents, at least you have a copy. So that's super important, to honor them and say, I've got you, no matter where you are. If you're going inpatient, I will have your documents in your file. You can come to this place and get it a year from now, 6 months from now, not 7 years after, but there's going to be a time where if they can say, I've got what I need, and then that's where you go forward with helping them within the employment and the housing. Be familiar. I am a resource queen. I know as many things as possible and always willing to learn more. Spa housing, supportive services for veteran family members. Know the difference between SSI and SSD. Know if they can apply for disability compensation, how to repeal their discharge, because a veteran who is homeless and jobless and supportless has a discharge for being homosexual in 1995, has an act here in New York to repeal that. So now they gain back all of the services that they haven't had that they deserved. So there's a culture between us that we know. We have acronyms. We love acronyms. Okay. So about it, learn about it, because then we feel seen and heard. And if we don't feel seen and heard, then we're going to not take it as seriously or don't feel as open. And I am one of those people who are like, I'll test you all day. And if you have a veteran like me, you better be playing chess, not checkers, because I know what I need. I know how to advocate, and I'm not going to stop. And I've done it in my employment. I've done it for myself with the veterans benefits. I mean, and know that when you're employing veterans, we love working with other veterans. Alyssa, Brent, Michael, Casey, we all work with other veterans because we know what it's like. We can lean on each other, and we're with these organizations that are true to the mission of helping other veterans, using the money that are given to them through profit or through grant writing, and actually giving it back to the veterans, because that's what we need. And that's what we need to make sure is staying true, because I'm seeing personally in a lot of things that are not ethical, because the veterans, we are losing the programming that they're expecting, because now they're being smaller and smaller and smaller, and then eventually they go away. So we need to grow. And I'm blessed the day I met Gavin Walters from upstate, who created our MST advocacy online, because it was never created before. He gave us a platform just to tell our stories and say, this happened to us and this existed. Whereas Alyssa and I know that we had to hold it for over a decade, and how heavy that had been. And just her and I knowing, same thing, like Mike, we could call each other and it will be okay. And we're not going to be shamed. We're not going to be a burden, because we all know. And that's the kind of camaraderie that we're talking about. And just because you're a counselor doesn't mean that you can't have that camaraderie, but it just has to be on a safe and moral and have those strict boundaries, but you're very important. We've hit a wall. We're looking to you for help. Please, like, understand that it's going to be really, really hard for us to even get in the door. There's all of this white coat, and medical trauma that like they don't want to even be there. So other resources are important. Equine therapy, being outside, art therapy. I was able to create images that women look at, men look at, veterans look at and say, that was me. That was me. I don't need any words. It's anonymous. It's just, they can just feel what I've been through. And for me to create that was cathartic, because all of the thoughts in my head, all of the memories, all the nightmares, all the thoughts was now placed into a object, into a canvas, into a paper, and it was no longer weighing me down. And I could say I've let go and I process this. And that was not even opening my mouth to talk. So remember that there's all different types of support. There's DBT, there's EMDR, there's equine therapy, there's the support. Also with the pause of war, remember the fact there's a difference between a service animal and emotional support companion. Know these different things, because that might really help someone just having a companion if they can't get that service animal. So be really fluent with these programs and access to care, and knowing that if you're an American who's disabled, the ADA protects you. So if you're in a place of employment where you're a veteran, you're struggling, be transparent with your supervisor, be transparent with that company and say, hey, I'm struggling and I deserve accommodation, because you don't deserve to lose your job based off of your disability. They need to make those accommodations. They need to make it so that they can find the solutions that fit the circumstance. And that is literally from the ADA website. So I want people to advocate for themselves and not get to the point where they're so stressed that they do want to commit suicide, when they could have helped themselves not get to that point, even after the military, when they're back transitioned into civilian life and into employment. Because for me personally, it's been a very big struggle of employment. And as a single mom on Long Island, I'm working. I've had 3 jobs and now I'm part-time, because I'm part-time because I can't handle a full-time job. I really can't. It's too much mental stress. And I know that I am important. I know that I am an asset, but I can't work 40 hours a week, and I deserve this time to give to myself. So remember that, not to push yourself to the barrier, to the point in which you're now going backwards. Sorry.
Ditto.
Can I piggyback off what Alyssa just said?
Yeah.
You can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I think what she said was very important. And for me, because of my lack of trust of people or in clinicians, and I would go through different therapists and I would say, hey, have you been in combat? How are you going to help me? And then for people like Alyssa, and no disrespect to clinicians, when you have boots in the ground, when somebody has experienced the same kind of environment as you will, that other veteran has been, I guess as a veteran advocate myself, through pause, that I'm able to say, listen, brother, whatever you're dealing with, trust me, I was facing homelessness. I was going to end myself, and I had many, many thoughts. I am able to use this resources, this situation, or this circumstance to bring yourself out. And so a lot of veterans, and I can't speak for everybody, but for me personally, I was like, okay, you make all this money. I'm facing homeless. I'm doing this. You got this wonderful degree, but you're not on my level. So when Alyssa was saying, you have to kind of be on that level to understand and really have that empathetic, where Adam was saying with those slides, and how to approach somebody, the empathy. A lot of veterans don't. I mean, as a Marine, again, I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I'm not one to feel sorry for you. I'm a warrior, right? However, your tone, how you empathize, how you could sympathize, with somebody at that level, you could be the factor by the time this person, if they come to you as a struggling individual, you could be the factor, whether they make it the following day or hour, or they have a successful life. And I could guarantee I've had veterans coming with me dealing with homelessness or at the end of the cliff that, Mike, it was because of our conversation that you brought yourself to me that I was able to see another day and continue on with my family. So I think it has to be, you have to be in tune. You can't be distracted like, oh, this is not kind of job. When we work for veterans, this is not the kind of job. We're servants, right? Anybody who've served, we serve. We're servants. And now anybody who does a job, whether it's a non-for-profit, for-profit, whatever, in this capacity, we are servants to the veteran. And you can't have that mindset, whereas you're working at something else, we're like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do after work? I can't wait till this meeting is over. What am I going to do for dinner? This is not this kind of job. You have to stay in tune with the brother or sister that you're speaking to, and you have to have their attention. And in my experience, if I didn't have the individuals that were focused on me and taking their time, it would have been a different outcome. I probably wouldn't even be here. If no one was saying, hey, Mike, I'm going to give you a chance. Because a lot of veterans, they do not want a hand out. They want a hand up. That's who our personality is. That's how we strive at best. And that's how we function as ultimate levels. You know, don't be sorry for me. I'm a warrior. I'm a machine. Just give me a hand. Get my back if I need you. A shoulder to cry on, an ear to listen to. But you have to be attentive to that veteran. I'm not the smartest guy in the world. Alyssa, you know, she mentioned all these detailed and stuff. I'm really not, you know. However, I have a way that I could be on your level. And no matter what you have dealt with, whether it's marriage or relationships or kid problems or financial problems or, you know, you name it, I have encompassed all that. And yet I'm still here because there's another day. The clouds will remove out of the sky and the sun will come out, but you have to make it for the other day. And if you have someone that's insensitive, that's not in touch or a member of reality or in touch with a veteran, it's a lot difficult. And now understand, I do have clinicians, my own docs at the VA that have not served. But out of 5 or 6 years or 7 years being with them, they've earned my trust because of their actions and how they incorporate. So if you leave somebody hanging, if you say, "Oh, I'm gonna follow up with you," you make sure you follow up with that individual. Because if you fail to follow up that individual, it could mean the world. I personally foretell. I catastrophize. I will. You know, there's other terminologies I can't think of right now. However, I do all those things on the scale. And it takes one to kind of break that cycle mentally, or that breakage that one is thinking of and having laser-eyed focus that you could be the difference between life and death. That's it for now. That's what I have to say.
Absolutely. That phone call, that follow-up, just hearing, hey, sorry, I couldn't get to you. That means a lot to people because they know that they're still on your mind. For me, my last—
They're heard.
Yes, I've had 3 suicide attempts in the last 5 years. And one of the first of them, there was someone from Warrior Ranch who had texted me, hey, Dani, you're not at the ranch. And just the fact that I felt like, wow, someone actually noticed I wasn't around. Meanwhile, I've been isolating, not talking to my friends, not leaving the couch, just working a job from home. So no one notices I'm in or out. It's during COVID. Just that like, hey, I noticed you're not here was enough for me to say like, wow, like I actually do matter to people. And building those relationships where you're afraid to be heard again is where you're going to grow. And for me at Warrior Ranch, I did not want to be anywhere near horses at all because they're big, majestic beasts that can kill you. But when I was outside the ring for 2 years, but then now I'm roping, now I'm on the horses. But the most important thing was that on top of learning the skill building of the horsemanship and the leadership of that you can lead again, because like Michael was saying, when you, and like Brent was saying, when you lose that confidence and when you lose that feeling of I was once something and now I'm nothing, when you get to be learning these things like moving a 2,000-pound horse with just your finger is one thing. But for me personally, based off of my trauma, it was more me having to put myself in a place with male veterans where I was once again the only female in the room, and I had to get over my trauma and I had to process what was the boundary for me of why I couldn't feel comfortable and why was I choosing to become this toxic person. And it was out of fear. It was out of my base of my past experience of not feeling safe, and then me becoming masculine and toxic because I didn't want anyone to talk to me. And then therefore we go back into isolation. So you have vicarious learning in so many different ways. And as a veteran, being with other veterans, there's going to be triggering moments. Like Mike was saying with the combat, I'm not a combat veteran, but I've been trespassed against and I can still do time and spacing for a 50 cal. So try me if you want to, but it's still the point that we all have our own traumas, and you have to be able to have that empathy for someone else to learn your own trauma and know yourself so that you're not continuing to hurt or hurt others. And that's a huge journey to go on. And it's not easy, but I very much encourage it.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also think, just to kind of get back to talking about the importance of cultural competency and working with clinicians and folks who actually understand the culture. Not all clinicians need to have served. Not everyone needs to have worn a uniform or donned a badge of sorts. When we're talking about veterans and first responders, because there's a big crossover with that. Just having a baseline of cultural competency and just taking the time to go out of your way and learn the language, learn the culture itself, the different branches and the nuances that makes every branch different. That will make you a better clinician. That will make you a better person to work with veterans. And if you cannot handle the AFCON, if you can't handle these kind of stories and experiences, because we're going to share some, and I'm going to cuss right now, we're going to share some fucked up shit. And if you cannot handle it, and me just talking the way I did upsets you, we are not the population you need to be working with. You need to go ahead and sign off and find yourself a different line of work. We are not a soft group to play with. You are going to have to listen and take the time to learn and understand and just really do the work if you want to make a difference. Because I've countless times I've had guys I've talked to like, oh, this guy keeps calling me a soldier. Like, bro, you're a Marine. Why don't you correct them? Well, I do. They don't care. So like, oh, are you saying like a private, position? No, man, I'm saying like the VA. Like people that, the VA is supposed to be Veterans Affairs, and they hire assholes who don't know anything about being a freaking veteran. And you got your private doctors that may or may not understand and know as well. So if you're going to be working with this community, take the time to learn is something I ask all of you to do. Take the time to sit there and actually learn about our culture, learn what we are. You don't need to freaking praise us or anything like that. Do not be thanking me for my service. Just take the time to learn what it is we do. And Danny, I will school you so hard on headspace and timing with the 50 cal and any belt-fed weapon system, so I will take you up on that challenge.
I would love to bump off that, Casey. Like, being a clinician with cultural competency is just so important. And veterans are blunt. We are straightforward. When we try to open up finally, like we're gonna we're gonna spill shit at you and you're gonna have to like learn to be okay with it. My last therapist, not the one I have now, was really blunt with me and I really appreciated it. I would come in for appointments and he would ask me flat out how I felt driving across the bridges that day. Because for me, it's overpasses and bridges. When I drive across them, if I'm struggling, I grip the steering wheel tighter and I have to convince myself not to turn the wheel. So his blunt question was what I needed every appointment. How are the bridges today? Did you take an alternate route to work? And it was like, yeah, I did. Like, I knew I couldn't go over the bridge. And so I needed him to be blunt with me and to be direct with me. And he was great about it. And my therapist, when I finally filed my MST case, I got a VA therapist again. This one was a female. She is not a veteran either, but works pretty primarily with MST cases. And she knew the lingo. She knew how to come at me in a way that I didn't feel judged. And she just made me feel like my words mattered. And that was something I hadn't felt in a really long time. So giving that space to your veterans to feel what they're feeling is so important.
I agree, and I just want to top that off with, first of all, I agree with what everyone is saying, but I want to thank you all who are here today and who are looking to help this wonderful, beautiful, vibrant, straightforward population. You know, it's really become my life's work. And then I just want to encourage you with a short story about a woman who was a civilian. Her name is Samantha Fletcher. Yes, I'm giving her props. And she would come in and, you know, at a previous role of hers with the state, as far as documenting numbers from the PFC Juvenile Peer Support Project in the different counties, and she would come in and she you know, was doing research and she was asking us questions and so forth and so on. And I told her my story. But she was asking questions, right? And she told me, she said, well, you know what, Brent? Although you're no longer in the military, you're still helping and you're still serving with your brothers and sisters. This is a civilian now, okay? This woman helped me to connect the dots. And the connection of those dots helped me to change my direction in the work that I was doing, you know, and I'm so ever forever grateful. And so, you know, you often hear people say, you're a veteran, I don't want to, you know, you're not a veteran, so I don't want to talk to you, I don't want to hear from you. But it's not like that in all cases. It's not. You don't have to be a veteran to help every veteran. You just don't. You know, so I just want to encourage you to continue to do the work that you're doing, continue to learn like we are all saying, because it's very important to learn about military culture. It's very important to be competent enough to understand where a person is coming from. And one question, I'm just going to give you a gold nugget. If you ask an individual who's a veteran, who's sitting in your seat, why did you join the military? You're probably going to learn a lot about that individual, about how they tick, how they talk. It's always proven to be a very important and good question for me. Be quiet.
No, it's great.
Can I just?
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I'm so sorry. You know, I just heard. I'm sorry, I lost the internet connection for like 2 seconds. Apparently, my kids are cleaning upstairs and it disconnected it. Right. So I'm sorry, guys. One thing that I've transformed my thinking, because a lot of veterans, when it comes to civilians, they say, "Thank you for your service." And I'm always like, you know, it's just like, it was in my job. That's what I signed up for. I'm a server. I like to help, right? Right, Brent, when you said, you know, why did you join? You know, I want to be the best. I want to help people. I want to tour the world. I want to fight for this country, whatever. However, I've transformed my thinking into and I heard this from another veteran, and I've adopted this quite recently, by the way, whereas thank you for your service, I've transformed it to thank you for your sacrifice. And I've seen that those words there go a lot of way, because in one, they may not always know that I'm a Marine, even though it comes up a lot, I will tell you straight up. However, it's really one of those things to whereas, oh, thank you for your service. It's just something that everybody says, like, hey, how are you doing? You don't really want to know the answer, but it's one of those things. Thank you for your sacrifice. When you transfer the service to the sacrifice, that lets me know that that I had family and friends at 19 years old, and I was in a different country, and I fought in combat, and it kind of puts me in a different way. And like you said, Brent, yes, even though I had to ask and I've had to learn, because not all clinicians are just, oh, I'm just book smart or what have you. There's a personal connection that I've learned with. They have been through some stuff, right? Social workers have been through some stuff as civilians, whether it's sexual trauma, whether it's they know a family or friend that have served, that because of that person who has served, or, and I'll take another further, because they met you, Brett or Alyssa or anybody who works with veterans, that's why I got into this profession. I didn't have that. I didn't have that guidance, as you will. All I needed to do or know in my heart as a veteran advocate, how can I continue to serve? And I feel like I'm more selfish, right? The reason why I do this to help my brothers, and I'm up even with all my kids I have, and I'm at ball games and recitals, and I'll step out, hey, brother, what's going on? It's because I think it's more of a selfish thing that I go with it. I need to make sure that my veteran brother or sister is safe. I need to know that you're okay because I've been there, you see? And yes, you don't have to be a veteran or to get you shouldn't be closed off all because your clinician has not served in any kind of capacity. However, in my experience with the multiple different therapists, the multiple different things, remember, I got out in 2003, that there is something who wants that clinician or that therapist to be involved with veterans, because honestly, the work we do, we're not in it to be millionaires, honestly. I mean, unless you're some kind of surgeon or you're doing anything else, what have you, we're not really in it for making boku bucks, but we're here to serve. They are here to serve. And because of their experience, even though it's not the same as ours, who have served or in a combat related situation, they have someone in their corner or someone that they have known that influence them to where you say, hey, Brett, why did you serve? Why, Mike, why did you serve? Well, why did you serve, Doc? Or why are you serving? That could be something that could be eye-opening as well for that individual. And I've known in my experience, my therapist just left a couple of weeks ago and I had to transform to another one. Well, that was tough. But yet at the end of the day, I'm a member of reality, and you can't keep the same person forever. But what has influenced them or qualifies them to give that? All because you got a degree doesn't mean anything. But what's in your heart? What's in your mind? What's in your soul and your body? Who are you that's going to help me? You see? And like Alyssa said, you have to advocate for yourself. Sometimes clinicians don't have a clue. And I'm sorry for those who are clinicians. But I'm glad that you're here to get the awareness and the spread, the tough questions that veterans like myself need to hear or get asked. But yet it's all about what can they do for this community that's underserved, perhaps, or we got $1 billion going to other places, but yet I was facing homeless. I was not 100% at one point, and a lot of my brothers and sisters that I deal with at pause are not either. But what makes the difference? Your
But also,
heart, soul, and mind.
Michael, also remember too that veterans make amazing clinicians. Like Brent, he works in substance abuse alongside me. The peer support is so valid, and the educational system is incredibly hard, but we also belong in these spaces because our lived experience combined with education will make it better and faster for veterans who are looking for the services, who want that camaraderie, who also want that knowledge of, like you said, the difference between empathy and sympathy. Like, so I encourage veterans to become clinicians or become peers and be in the spaces where you don't see. And for me, I sat in a chair and she took my trauma like a hot potato and threw it back on me. And I said, never again will I allow this. And that's why I became a clinician and why I turned my spite into power, because I was like, I will not give up. I will not give up until I become a clinician. And I'm still not giving up, even though it's hard. And I've had my permit extended because I deserve to be in these spaces and I deserve to help veterans with my clinical knowledge and lived experience. And I really hope that other veterans can get to the places that we are all on in this panel, where we're veterans who help other veterans, because the title doesn't matter. Like you said, it's all in the heart and it's all in the advocacy, the education, and, making sure that we're heard. And then we need to ask the people around us to make sure these programs stay, make sure we can grow, because it's needed. We can't just access the VA. Please know that. There are more veterans than not commit suicide because they're not followed by the VA. So those numbers that we see, the 22 a day, those aren't accurate because those are only numbers based off the VA. And I want people to remember that.
They inflate the hell out of those numbers, and they like to play the little numbers game of, the individuals that have committed suicide, they aren't even qualified as a veteran due to whatever government definition bullshit they want to give, because, you gotta, meet certain criteria to be a veteran and all that, so, yeah, the VA likes to play with that number a lot to make themselves look like, hey, we're doing great. And it's like, you're not, though, because if you actually look at the real numbers that are being put out there, it's a lot higher, significantly higher.
There's something about that spite, Dani, that keeps us going too. Like that bad experience at the VA turned me into an advocate. Like I had a couple bad experiences and I realized that I knew how to advocate for myself with the VA, but that a lot of my peers, other veterans, they didn't know how to do it. They would get no for an answer or get told the next mental health appointment is in 3 months. You have to wait. And they would take that answer because that's what the VA is giving them. And so now I have this great role where I get to pick up the phone and call the VA and be like, that answer is not acceptable. This is not what we are doing with veterans. We're going to help him now. And I feel like it's really empowering for me to be able to help other people, but it also gives them the power that they then learn how to advocate for themselves within a system that is just not optimal.
It's not easy to navigate. And people don't understand that if you live in a place that's far away from your VA, to do a community, have all these different providers that are not specifically in the VA system, if you are triggered, if you do feel you can get specialized cares outside in the community, and use that spite and survive out of spite, because you know what you deserve. And the self-advocacy of doing something for yourself because you're seeing someone like Alyssa, seeing someone like Brent and like Casey and like Michael, who are saying, I'm not giving up and you're not either, you become a role model. And then people say, okay, I can do this too. I'm there by my side. We are going to get through this, even if we don't know the answer. That kind of role model is what's important for me in substance abuse. When I tell my guys, look, I've been 70 grand in debt. I've been homeless. I've lived in a tent. I've done all the things that you've done, but I'm here now in front of you telling you that you can be sober and you can be happy and you can be safe. And that is something that you cannot find in a textbook or a DSM-5, and they'll look at you and say, wow, like it's possible for me too. And you can say, yes. And that's what they want to see. They don't want war stories. They want the recovery. They want to know that there is better out there. And the same thing for suicidality. We're in a place where you don't think that there's any other escape besides death, then you're giving them the hope that there's something out there that's going to be meant for them. And they can feel like, this is what I've waited for, to be part of something bigger than myself.
Right. Can I respond to a question that I saw from John? He said that why is suicide so big in the military? I don't know if you guys saw the question, but in my experience, it was the sense or the loss of camaraderie. Even I could be in a stadium, in a concert or not that I do this, but just an example, I could feel the most loneliest person in the world and being around a stadium of freaking people. It's the loss of camaraderie. It's the sense of fitting in to where your military career as a Marine, and my other brother could contest to us, as a Marine, and please excuse me, guys, of any other branch, a Marine is a Marine. It's not like you're in the Army, you're a soldier. You take on that identity. And with that identity, you are taught from day one in boot camp, you are a machine. You are a warrior. We don't cry. We don't complain. We don't get hurt. There's nothing else. And then when that's embedded in your soul, and I'm not just talking about surface level. I walked around in Brooklyn I was an exterminator in the projects at one point after doing bounty hunting. I needed something safe. So I would go into projects in Queens, in Brooklyn, and what have you, at all hours in the night by myself. And no matter who was around, I would address them, gentlemen, and keep doing my thing. Because I was invincible. No one could hurt me. I'm a freaking Marine. I am,
Mike?
yes.
I'm sorry. I feel uniquely entitled to interject into your rant as a fellow Marine. We do have to start wrapping, so it's just a friendly time check, but as a fellow Marine.
5 o'clock already? Oh my goodness.
Well, we're 10 to, so we want to possibly have time for a few questions, which since everyone here by themselves could speak for 2 hours straight and we'd all love it. We definitely want to get into that, and then we have to talk about the CE credit form that people have to fill out. So Aynisa, do you want to do some quick questioning? And Mike, if you want to do some more Marine Corps like URA stuff after we end, I got you, buddy.
I'm sorry. I was just trying to address John's question on why the suicide rate has happened. And the short answer is that it's the sense of the lack of belonging. It's the lack of your buddy always where you used to that environment. You're able to check in with them and you lived and breathed things. And now the environment has changed and you're at a place. And those things, because you feel you're a machine or what have you, it weighs like someone like me. And it's very difficult to kind of cope in the civilian world as compared to your military experience. So, John, I'm so sorry, brother. I hope I answered that question. If that's good enough. Sorry about that, brother.
Yeah, I mean,
Thanks,
it's a great question. And you all went into so many different layers of that. And I think it applies to the veteran population and beyond, all of the things that you brought up. I took some notes because when you were all talking, you actually covered like 3 questions that I had planned to ask you. You kind of segued yourself and navigated through them. And that was, why it was unique to veteran population, what suggestions you had in terms of communication and language, and best care practices, what was effective in pulling you out of it. And then the big one that like we didn't go into too much, but I know we're short on time but you guys did touch on it a bit, was just like what to look for beforehand. If somebody might be starting to feel hopeless or have suicidal ideation, what are you looking for? And you did mention like family struggle, finances, job issues, isolation, feeling like you're not being seen, not being heard, things like that. Alyssa, you brought up such a good point about like expectations and pressures from others. Like I should be this and I should be that. I think that comes up pretty universally as well, from a lot of conversations I've had, just like not meeting those shoulds that people impose on you, especially as veterans, where people might say, oh, or your family, community, the media, right? Like they put you into a category, and deviation from that sometimes is frowned upon, or you then might feel a sense of failure, which I believe is unwarranted. I've seen veterans obviously find their way and their purpose completely different from what maybe others or themselves actually believed at one point. So it's a pleasure to be part of all of your journeys on this side. I saw so many comments saying like, so glad you're here. And yeah, I want to echo that and just say like, you're all survivors, and what an empowered voice that you shared today collectively. And that's not easy to do. So thanks for doing that and basically navigating all of the panel questions on your own, with not much prompting. That's pretty amazing. That doesn't happen very often. So you guys are incredible, and really just want to give a kudos to the vulnerability. What Mike was just saying about just like the bravado attitude too. That's common also, and like it's hard to be vulnerable for most people, but especially for those of service, I think, who have to wear that as like a form of self-protection and survival. To shed that when you're feeling pain, it's not that easy. It's not a switch that you could turn off and on. And I think that's also plays into why suicide sometimes feels like the answer to some people. Like, well, I don't know how to be vulnerable and talk about my pain, so I'm just going to give up. Right. So, yeah, I mean, I couldn't have, listening to all of you, I was just like, wow, I was just trying to take notes to capture it. And I did drop some of the notes into the comments. I don't know if everyone saw, it was a little while back. This comment section is popping. So, but I tried to capture some of the great points that you all were making. I will turn it back over to Melanie. I know she has a couple things she wants to go over regarding logistics, but just thank you for everyone for attending about and learning about this important topic. And obviously mostly to NASW and our panelists for presenting this material today.
Thank you, Aynisa. If you guys can just throw a ton of thanks for our panelists in the chat. We were so lucky to have this lineup. Thank you, Aynisa. Thank you, Dani, Brent, Michael, Casey, Alyssa. You guys were fantastic. I just want to remind everyone in attendance that if your attendance was wonky, if you got kicked during the panel and had to come back and you don't get your CE credit, just send us an email, send me an email, send Aswani's an email. We'll work it out, because sometimes that can disrupt it. But you have to stay till the end to get credit. So if you've made it this far, that's great. Please fill out the link that Angelique is putting in. If you're a clinician. If you're a clinician, in order to get your CE credits, you have to fill out the link. If you're not a clinician, it would just be nice, but it's not mandatory. So thank you guys so much. Again, I'm going to throw in some of my information. If you want to present to the committee, the Veteran Mental Health Training Initiative Committee that Dani and Brent and I sit on, the group of veterans that plan and come up with these panels, if you have an idea for some kind of training or cultural competency or something specific. I don't know if John is still here with his problem gambling background, but like the education problem gambling. But if you have any ideas, we're an open book. Reach out to us, come chat about your subject matter expertise so we can put it on the list of panels that we want to come up with. If you have resources to share, reach out. If you have resources to request, reach out. And again, thank you so much for joining us today. Amelia, are you around?
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm here. I'll just reiterate just a last couple things, administrative things. Again, about the CEs, you had to attend the entirety of the program, and in order to receive your CEs and complete the evaluation link that I've put in the chat box, I'm also going to send it out to everyone to the email that you registered with. It takes about 10 minutes to get to your email address. So just be patient, know that it's coming. Zoom and Constant Contact has to do their thing to make sure that we just send it to those who did attend the program. You must complete and submit the evaluation by this upcoming Monday, July 22nd, in order to receive the CEs. And again, this recording will be available on YouTube. I just want to thank everyone on screen and reiterate all of the things that are coming in the chat box. Again, it's an incredible program. It's so powerful to hear from everybody here, and just honored to be able to support this program and the work that you all do. So thank you so much. And you will be receiving those evaluation links shortly. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Have a good day. Mike,
Bye.
what you want to share?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question, Melanie. Excuse me. You said that in
Is this a-
resources here for everybody like Brent, Alyssa, and myself who works in these organizations that help other veterans who
You
are
can share
especially
Paws
on
of
the sport.
War. You can share Paws of War. You can share your personal favorite resources. We'll send that out.
Okay. Will you do that, or should I just say it?
Yeah, oh no, you can send me an email and just write down a list of all your, because Casey, he was really excited about certain programs that Forge has. And again, if you're still here, we don't, as Niswanis and as VMHTI, we don't like vet these programs, but we say that if they're good enough for our presenters, we ask you to do your due diligence and just check them out. It could be a great fit, could be a perfect fit, could be not your thing at all. So please check out all the resources that we will be sending you, including those Columbia Gatekeeper slides. And Mike, I don't know if you mentioned it, Mike works for Paws of War, which is a fantastic guide dog project. They do amazing work.
Service dog, not guide.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the veteran version. Sorry.
That's right.
Yeah. Send me those links, and for everyone in the chat, if you have resources too, feel free to send that stuff out. So I just dropped again my email, my LinkedIn, however you want to reach out to me, I'll compile everything and we'll get this stuff out to you guys. And remember, next month we're having veterans in higher education. Aynisa is going to do a great job with that panel. And again, we have fantastic subject matter experts to join us. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye, Melanie.
You have no
Bye,
idea how
everybody.
much it works for me to talk to you guys. You guys are amazing.
Aw,
Have a great
thank
rest of the
you.
week. And thank you for allowing me to be part
Good
of
seeing
this.
you,
Bye,
Amelia.
guys.
Bye, guys.
It's so great to see everyone. So great to see you, Brent. I texted Sam and told her that you were talking about her, see if her ears were ringing. So it's wonderful to see
Oh,
everyone.
awesome.
Look forward to seeing everyone again soon.
You guys are amazing. Be well, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you
Bye.
so much for having me.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Angelique, I think you're host. If you could close it out.
Bye, Casey. Take care, brother.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, Mike.
Bye, guys.
Bye.